Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Michael Myers fanatic. I'm here today to review The Twilight Zone from 2002. It stars Jason Alexander, Jason Bateman, Elizabeth Berkley, Linda Cardellini, Rory Culkin, the brother of Macaulay Culkin, Vivica A. Fox, Eric LaSalle, Cloris Leachman. She played in the original It's a Good Life, along with Bill Mumy as Anthony Friedmont, Amber Tamblyn, Jeremy Sisto, Jeremy Piven, Christopher Titus, Dylan Walsh, and more. This premiered September 18th, 2002. Now we're going to go over some of my favorite episodes. I love this series, which is why I did 3 unboxings based on each version of the Twilight Zone. I've done the 1960s, the 1980s, and now I have 2002. They're supposed to be working on a new one, and some guy named Bryan Singer is involved. Don't know much about him, but anyway, let's get on with the Twilight Zone 2002. It premiered on UPN Network, which is no longer in existence. It was disbanded, if you want to use that term, in 2006, the fall of 2006 to be exact. The executive producers for this show are Ira Stephen Bear and Jim Rosenthal. It was shot in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which is strange. I thought it was shot in California like most of the Twilight Zones, but I was wrong. I also have Twilight Zone the movie, but I didn't do an unboxing for that one for some reason. It was produced by a company called New Line Television, Spirit Dance Entertainment, Trilogy Entertainment Group, Josh Max Production Services. It ran from September 18, 2002 to May 21st, 2003, and it is preceded by The Twilight Zone from 1985. Now we are going to discuss some of my favorite episodes. Okay, here's the first episode, Evergreen. It stars Amber Tamblyn, and she plays as some kid named Jenna Winslow. Here's the thing with Evergreen. I didn't like her. I'm sorry. I didn't like Jenna Winslow, always getting into trouble. They moved her to this community called Evergreen, which can only be found in the Twilight Zone, as they put it. So once they entered the Twilight Zone, they find out that they killed children, rebellious children, and it's like so terrible to think that. It's so terrible to even think that way, but you know what? That kid was annoying. It's like she was going to do whatever she wanted to do, no matter what you did, no matter what you said. I'm sorry. Once they got rid of her, I was like, you know what? You do what you got to do, because she wasn't going to change. If they tried to make us hate the character, they did a good job, because I hated her. She was so rebellious and annoying and stubborn. Next, we have an episode called One Night at Mercy, and that stars Jason Alexander. He plays Death, or the Angel of Death, and he comes to take a guy named Dr. J. Ferguson. And another good episode, one of my favorite ones, is Shades of Guilt, and that's basically about this guy. Basically, he doesn't like African Americans. He's a racist, but he tries to hide it. He's one of those subtle racists, and this guy's trying to run up to the car, banging on the door, bang, 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 let me in, let me in. The guy that's banging on his door is played by Hill Harper, and he's a professor. He's banging on the door and he's asking Matt McGreevy, played by Vincent Ventresca, I guess that's how you pronounce it. But he's banging on his door saying, "Let me in, they're trying to beat me up." Because, you know, the white people, the skinheads or whatever you want to call them, they're beating him up. The guy wouldn't let him in. What happens? You know what happens. He enters the Twilight Zone and he, Matt McGreevy, turns into an African American. Of course, that scares the crap out of him because the idea of being an African American is scary to him because he's a racist. But he turns into the other guy, you know, the professor, and he learns what it feels like to be discriminated against and things like that. He starts going through all the things that African Americans and other minorities go through. The taxi cab won't stop for him. They won't let him get a hotel room, all kinds of things like that. And to make a long story short, he comes back from the Twilight Zone learning that people are people and you should just judge people by the content of their character. It doesn't matter what they look like. Let me say this. I don't mean to offend anybody, but I want to congratulate every single writer who's ever been involved with the Twilight Zone franchise, because they stuck to the theme that it doesn't matter what you look like, people are alike all over. Everywhere you go, people are the same. Doesn't matter where you're from. It only matters where you're going. That's the only thing that's important. And they really stuck to that theme. That's a theme that Rod Serling started, and they stuck with it, and I want to thank them for it. It personally touched me to learn that as an African American, that they don't care what you look like. And that was something that Rod Serling was really passionate about. So a shout out to the Serling family. Thank you guys for keeping the legacy alive. Rod Serling is missed, believe me. Next we go to an episode called Dream Lover, and this stars Shannon Elizabeth and a guy named Adrian Pazdar. And he's some kind of graphic artist that thinks that he's created a dream lover, and it turns out that he's the one that's the dream lover. I'm not gonna spend too much time on these episodes. You can look up the rest for yourself. My favorite one has to be Shades of Guilt. I also like the one where they were in the Garden of Eden. That one had Elizabeth Berkley in it. Another episode I like is Time Lapse. That's about another guy who got stuck in someone else's life to stop the presidential assassination. I might as well tell you about that now since I already said it. His name was Zach Walker, and he's played by Ethan Embry. Let's move on. Another episode I like is called Chosen, and it's about this guy that thinks that aliens are out to get him, but in fact they're angels, and they basically come back to preach the news about Jesus Christ and his kingdom on earth. And they didn't come out and use his name. I thought that was really weird, because like, why couldn't you just say Jesus? I don't understand that. It's weird, but they didn't use his name. They just talked about aliens. So I don't understand why they were afraid to use that name. But anyway, that's basically what they were doing. They were talking about Jesus and his kingdom on earth, but everyone thought they were aliens. And some guy named Vince ended up shooting one of the angels. Therefore, he couldn't make it to heaven, and he died in the war on earth. That was a good episode. I like the episode called Last Lap, which is about a terminally ill man named Andy Perez, and he's played by Clifton Collins Jr. and his best friend Marco Flores, played by Greg Serrano, and they do a drag race, and you guessed it, you can't do a drag race without taking an unexpected detour into the Twilight Zone. Yes, I'm sorry, that was my Rod Serling voice, I just had to do that. But anyway, they go into the Twilight Zone to find out that there's no reason to fear death, everybody dies, and when they go into the Twilight Zone, Andy's friend Marco dies in there, but then when they get back to Earth, or whatever you want to call it, it's actually Andy that's dying. So it was reversed when they went into the Twilight Zone. Those are really the only ones that I like. The other ones were kinda lame, I admit that. Like Azov the Avenger with Rory Culkin. It had the doll that came to life and rescued his family. Like, you know, that was kinda lame. I didn't like that. I'm only gonna discuss the ones that I like. I really enjoyed the Twilight Zone. I'm not stuck on Rod Serling. I'm not a Rod Serling purist. Rod Serling was great. He really was. But the thing is, people can't live forever. You have to learn how to evolve and move on. I've moved on. As long as the host is a good host, as long as they have good writers and good actors, I don't care what host it is, I don't care what race he is, as long as he's a good host. I enjoy the Twilight Zone, all parts of it, whether Serling's in it or not, because I'm just a Twilight Zone fan, bottom line. So I'm gonna enjoy watching this. I cannot wait to crack it open and get watching. The only reason I did a review is because I had already seen these. I like the Twilight Zone. What's that one episode called with Sidney Poitier's daughter? I believe it's called The Placebo Effect is what that's called, where this guy named Harry Radich, played by Jeffrey Combs, supposedly has this disease, but he imagined it because it came from a comic book. And he made the disease real, and she has to try to save him. The doctor does. Those are the only ones I really liked. The other ones were kinda lame, as I said. Especially the one called How Much Do You Love Your Kid? Really? You're making an episode of the Twilight Zone about a kidnapping victim. What's so Twilight Zone about that? That happens in real life. Whatever. I enjoyed reviewing this for you guys. The Twilight Zone, starring Forest Whitaker and a whole host of other stars. I can't even name them all. But it premiered on September 18th, 2002. It was produced by New Line Television. Please go and pick this up if you're a fan. But if you're a Rod Serling purist and a Rod Serling fan, I wouldn't advise you to get it. I'm not. I'm just a Twilight Zone fan. Bottom line. Point blank. I'm not going to sit here and obsess over Serling. I'm just going to enjoy the show. I advise you guys to do the same. I approve this message. I know I said I approve this message, and that's normally the point when the video ends. But first of all, I want to thank everybody for watching this video, my review of the Twilight Zone from 2002, and my 1980s review. I want to let you all know that I wasn't trying to take anything away from Rod Serling. I, along with the other fans, respect Mr. Serling. I wasn't here when he was alive, but from what I'm told, he was well respected when he was alive, and he continues to be well respected long after he's passed. But I want to say this. The Twilight Zone has always been about chances. Whether they be first chances or second chances, Sometimes even third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. But it's always been about chances. And sometimes the people are too late, but most of the time they weren't. So with that being said, don't you think it's fair that we give someone else a chance? It doesn't matter what the host looks like or where he comes from. Just give this new host a chance, whoever it happens to be in this next revival that's coming up. After all, we all deserve our chance in the Twilight Zone.